Hi, this is Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Nice to be back with you. This is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle. This show is going to be about Donald Trump and, well, more generally about the presidential campaign that's now getting into gear. People are asking me, hey, what do you think of Donald Trump's campaign? And of course, I'm a libertarian and he isn't, but I think his participation in this presidential campaign is absolutely awesome. Now, why do I say that? Well, not for the reasons that the press is saying or anybody else is saying. I think his participation is fantastic because it's essentially a walking, real life, living parody of what the whole presidential race has become. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic. If you were going to devise a mockery of the whole political process, you couldn't come up with a better example than the Donald Trump campaign. I mean, I went to his website just to kind of see what his positions were, thinking, well, there'll be specific, policy positions, what his philosophy is, and so forth. Now, I could have made a mistake. I may have just missed it. And if so, I apologize for that. But from what I could gather, there were no policy positions. That the thrust of his campaign is he's going to make America great again. Now, I think that's just fantastic because, look what's happened with the presidential races. I mean, look what, and he's pointed this out, where the other candidates, they carefully couch what they're going to say, and they have focus groups, and how are the voters going to react to this message and that message, and they spend days and days crafting what to say, and most of all, they never answer the question that's asked of them if it's a pointed question. They always answer a question that they would have preferred to be asked. And what's fascinating is the press just goes right along with it. Very rarely do you hear them saying, look, you didn't really answer my question. And if they do, the candidate just answers another question that wasn't asked, and they let him get by with it. Well, here's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the living parody of this. I mean, he just says, I'm going to make America great. And that's it. Well, I'm a hard negotiator. I'll demand some really strong terms when I deal with the world leaders. And I mean, it is the most hilarious thing you've ever seen. I mean, it really goes to show you what this whole political process has come to. And it's really, I mean, it's not surprising that without his, people ask him why you like it. Well, he's made it less boring. I mean, without his participation, let's face it would be a totally boring campaign. Why? Well, because of these parameters that they operate under. You see, you can't go outside the parameters. You got to accept, for example, the whole premise of the welfare state way of life, which we now live under, which early Americans didn't have to live under. And then you've got the warfare state way of life, the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA. And I mean, you've got to accept that these are now permanent apparatuses that have been attached to our government, that they're going to be here forever. And so the legitimate paradigm of discussion is within those parameters. You can argue reform, and you can argue, whether how to fix this program. You can even argue on whether Obamacare should be abolished or not, but you don't question the very notion of government involvement in healthcare, retirement, or foreign wars, or what have you. And so the process essentially has become extremely boring. And they pride themselves, oh, this is a democratic system, and they preach to the world about how marvelous America's democratic system is. Come on. They chide China for having a one-party state, when really that's what exists here. It's a de facto one-party state. Now, you might say, oh, well, Jacob, how can that be? We got Democrats and Republicans, and they compete against each other. Well, the National Football League has two leagues in it, and they compete against each other, but it's still just one league. Same thing with Major League Baseball. It's one, organization divided into two branches, the American League and the National League, but it's one organization. And that's the way it is with this political party that has run the welfare warfare state for umpteen years. It's a one-party system, no different than exists in China. And one side of it is the Democrats, and the other side is the Republicans. Now, they compete against each other, but they have the same philosophy. the same philosophy as far as the role of government is concerned. And that's really why the other candidates really can't attack Trump, because he's not saying anything when he does come out with a position that any different from what they believe in. I mean, like one of the few things that he says is, "Oh, we're got to do something about the immigration problem." Well, they all say that, right? I mean, isn't that the standard shtick? You know, we got to do something about the immigration problem. So if the press or anybody asks them, well, okay, what should be done? Well, yeah, we really should do something. Well, appoint a committee to study the problem, or we've got to all get together and devise a strategy here. And well, you see, as long as you don't question the paradigm of immigration controls, you're fine. Now, Trump says, build a wall, build a wall. You know, like sort of like what he means is like the Berlin Wall, you know, an impregnable wall with high barbed wire and everything. I mean, you can even get the East Germans to come and build it, but except that they're immigrants, so I guess that he wouldn't want those in to build a wall. But I mean, you see, he has not expressed anything different from what the rest of them believe when he does express a position. And I assume that as time goes on, he's going to have to express some more specific proposals, because I said, well, how are you going to build this wall? What does it entail? Well, we'll get to that. I'm a hard negotiator. I can get what I want. We're going to make America great again. And all these platitudes and mantras and stuff. But this really is a living, breathing mockery of the whole system. Now, notice what they do with the Libertarian Party, and have for decades. You see, it's true they don't shut down the Libertarian Party. They don't make it illegal, you know, like they were doing with communists and the Communist Party and so forth, when back during the days of the Cold War, when they were really obsessed with communists taking over in America. So they leave independents and the Libertarian Party free to, quote, compete. But notice what they do. They erect these huge barriers where they've got the rigged presidential debates, which is really a semi-government operation, and where only their people that subscribe to their paradigm are allowed in. I mean, you recall the problems that Ron Paul had when he ran both times. They didn't want him in there. They did everything they could to exclude him from those debates. Why? Because his paradigm was outside. He was questioning things outside their paradigm, or looking at the paradigm from outside, looking in and questioning the whole premises of the paradigm. They don't like that. And that's why they don't like the Libertarian movement. That's why they don't like the Libertarian Party. So they've erected these huge barriers to entry, you know, like ballot access restrictions, where you have to get 1 million signatures and you have to make sure they're notarized by somebody that's in that district and 2 witnesses, and, you know, all this nonsense where they make the Libertarians, whose resources are quite limited, spend all their money on ballot access. And then they get on the ballot, there's no money left to campaign, and they don't let them into the debates. It's all a rigged game. But it's rigged in a very sophisticated manner where they can say, we have a democratic system in America. You know, everybody can participate. That's just nonsense. And, you know, like here in Virginia, the ballot access barriers are so high that it's very rare that you get a person running for statewide office. And they, you know, their attitude is, oh, well, the citizenry are just not smart enough to ferret out a lot of candidates. I mean, you know, give me a break. People can't figure out candidates. I remember back over in California, back a few years, they had a special election where they somehow or another, the rules didn't apply on anybody running, and anybody could run, and they had like 25 candidates for governor or something. Well, everybody figured it out, and I think it was Schwarzenegger that got elected in that election. But I mean, it was an exciting race. I mean, you had a lot of people with diverse views. It was fun. It was exciting. And of course, you know, as compared to the Virginia race, where you got the Republican and the Democrat, sometimes a Libertarian, but very rarely and hardly ever an independent. It's just boring. So you know, along comes a guy like Trump, and whatever, you know, he's not boring. He's like fun to watch. Is like I say, it's like this walking parody of the whole you know, corrupt political presidential race that's become. And you know, notice that what's really funny about this also is that, you know, the whole thing is so crooked and corrupt because, and he pointed this out, Trump said this, and And I mean, you could hear a pin drop when he said this. It was really funny because I think that the press is right that Trump's popular because he's just speaking his mind. He's just saying it like it is, and that's not what those other candidates do. I mean, I bet you after that debate they went back and started studying the tape, and their advisors saying, "Let's put this before focus groups, and how should we respond to Trump, and what do you think we ought to say on this point?" Crafting them like sort of like the Stepford Wives or something. That's what these candidates are. But Trump says, "Look, I give money to candidates because I'm expecting something in return." Now we all know that's the system. That's the welfare state system. Where you've got trillions of dollars in largesse that's given out to people. And so, you give donations to candidates because those candidates can give you largesse. Or they can give privileges for you in terms of income tax deductions and things like that, income tax credits. On the warfare state side, it's even bigger and worse, where you've got, quote, defense contractors and subcontractors and all the people that depend on the military loot and plunder that's taken from the taxpayers. And so, everybody's donating to the candidates. Now, you can't have a formal quid pro quo. You can't say, here's the money, and give me the benefit. And every so often you notice that they go after candidates, like they went after a former governor of Virginia recently, McDonnell, because they say, well, he had a quid pro quo. He gave benefits to some guy that had given him money for his campaign. Well, but the whole system's based on that. And so why do they go after McDonnell? Why do they go after these people? For the same reason the Chinese go after their people every so often. You have to let people know that they're doing something about the crookedness and the corruption in government, you see. And so they have these anti-corruption campaigns, and they select out the sacrificial lambs. Who's the one they're gonna go after? But they all do this. I mean, that's the whole nature of the system. Now, the reason that it's not a formal agreement, well, it's a felony, obviously, but they know how the system operates. So you give the big money in advance, and the candidate knows that if he's elected, he better deliver. Because if he doesn't deliver, they're not going to give him the money the next time around. And there's always a next time around because they love the power. So if he delivers, then the money floods in the next time. No quid pro quo. It's just a coincidence that all these benefits came to us. Well, Donald Trump points this out in the middle of the debate, and you could just see the stunned looks on everybody's faces. It's like, you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to. The emperor has no clothes. And notice that, from what I could tell, nobody denied it. Everybody is like, uh-oh, he's speaking things that are the truth that, you're not supposed to say. So what he's doing is he's raising aspects of the welfare state that are sort of like outside the parameters. And again, the two big parameters are the welfare state and the warfare state. You don't question those parameters. Now, you can call for reform. Okay, that's okay. Let's say, even within the context of the parameters, you can say, I want to abolish Obamacare. Oh, okay, well, that's fine. And then you can say, well, I want medical IRAs where people are forced to, pay taxes, and then we'll give them a deduction for this, sort of like it's manipulative. What it is really economic fascism. And that's another good reason why having Trump in this race is good, because a lot of his ideas are a combination of socialism, economic fascism, mercantilism, socialism. And so it gives us the opportunity as libertarians to talk about concepts that sometimes seem esoteric to people. But economic fascism is one of these concepts. And what economic fascism is, it's different from socialism. It leaves private property in private hands, but then says, but you're going to be subject to government control and regulation. So we're not like the socialists, they say. We're not going to take your property away from you. We're going to leave it in your hands, but then we're going to order you and tell you what to do or direct you or manipulate you. And, a good example of this is medical IRAs, because as we libertarians hold, a free society is like, you keep everything you earn, you decide, make your own decisions on health care. There's no Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, occupational licensure, healthcare regulation, none of that. Just like there's no Social Security. You keep it, you decide what to do, and then if people need help, that's what charity's all about, which is all voluntary. But then you've got economic fascism that says, well, we're going to let you keep your money, but then we're going to tell you what to do with it, or manipulate you with income tax deductions and so forth. And, Social Security privatization that we often hear in the conservative movement, where people, will be able to keep their own money, but then are forced and directed to invest it with some privileged investment houses where you get a selection. That's where they call choice. And if you don't do it, we're going to punish you severely through the power of the state. Well, that's what economic fascism is all about. Same with medical IRAs and all these other, ways to reform the welfare state. Libertarians are outside that paradigm because we don't believe in those kind of things. Reform means keep it intact, but reform it, change it, so you're not questioning the basic paradigm. Well, in libertarianism, we attack the paradigm. You see, you've got the little status box, as I call it, where you've got Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and drug laws, and licensure laws, and regulations, and SEC, and DEA, and IRS, and income taxation, and the whole kit and caboodle. We look at that box and say, dismantle the box. The conservatives and the Democrats are inside the box arguing how to make it work. And of course, it never works. Now, the same thing with the warfare state box. Foreign interventionism, foreign empire, big empire, military empire, standing army, CIA, NSA. And so you've got conservatives that are saying, got to rein it in, got to cut military spending, got to be more selective on foreign interventions. Okay, all that's legitimate within the paradigm, within the statist paradigm, because it's not challenging the paradigm itself. We libertarians challenge the paradigm. We say there shouldn't be a warfare state in America. That's a totalitarian apparatus. It came into existence after the Cold War. It is anti-freedom. It's nothing consistent with what America was founded on, of principles of limited government. Now, an interesting example of this phenomenon is in Cuba. And when I went to Cuba, I figured everybody's going to be a socialist there, or everybody's going to be too scared to talk about libertarianism there. Well, I happened to hook up with a foundation there at the University of Havana, where I started asking them questions. Now, I hooked up with a lot of foundations there, and they were all, mouthing the official line. I mean, they were like the Stepford Wives again, the official line: socialism works, socialism's great, just give us time. And same thing you see here with the socialist fascist aspects of the welfare warfare state. Give us time. We can make Iraq work. We can make Afghanistan work. Just make the occupation another 10 years, or give us time on Medicare and Social Security, even though 50 years have passed. We can make it work, or the drug war, or immigration controls, and on and on and on. Well, I hooked up with this foundation at the University of Havana that was talking a little bit differently. And I was just amazed. So I started hanging out with them a little bit more, probing questions, and it turned out these guys are libertarians. And there was women in there too. There was like a little club, within this foundation. And so we went out to dinner and we chatted and talked, and they're all like libertarians. And so one of them invited me into his home, and he shows me his bookshelf. And there are books by Mises and Hayek and Friedman and other Austrians. And I was like stunned. I said, how do you get away with this here in Cuba? And he says, you got to understand the parameters. He says, as long as we don't question the revolution. Now, by the revolution, they mean their welfare warfare state. Okay, you don't question the premises of the socialist system in Cuba. They have Social Security, they have Medicare and Medicaid, they have free education like public schooling, all the way to college. They have free this and free that. The state owns everything because the state takes from the rich. It took from the rich in order to give to the poor. So they took the homes away and the businesses away to give them to the poor. And of course, everybody's now living in desperate poverty. That's what socialism does. It leads toward poverty. This is what happens when people let their feelings of envy and covetousness. It's not fair that others have more when others have less. And it gets the best of people, and they end up with the Cuban type system where the state owns everything. Well, this guy was telling me, he says, look, as long as we don't question the system, we can call for reform. So he says, I can bring up free market proposals as long as I couch them in terms of reform. If I go outside and I attack the premises of the state-owned stuff, the welfare state, the paternalistic state, the socialist state, he says, I'm in deep trouble. And so I thought that was absolutely fascinating, because essentially that's the way the paradigm here works. That now, of course, they don't put people in jail here, granted, if you question the system. I mean, we question the system as libertarians, but they do everything they can to marginalize us as libertarians, keeping us, in the political process, keeping the Libertarian Party out of the debates, for example, and ballot access restrictions and so forth. And then even just the social ostracism that goes with advocating pure ideas on liberty. I mean, you can sense it, or against the empire. And the best example of this, usually they go after people that are more famous, like when they went after, the conservatives went after Linda Ronstadt and the Dixie Chicks for questioning the whole bombing of invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and all the killings of all the people that had nothing to do with 9/11 and so forth. Man, they went after them like with a passion, and we saw it after 9/11. I mean, I'd never seen so much hate mail in all my life, when we were saying, look, here are the fruits of your empire. They have produced 9/11. And man, I mean, I was speaking at a libertarian conference like 2 weeks after 9/11, and I brought this up. I said, this is what we've been saying for, what was it at that point, 15 years or so of Future Freedom Foundation's existence. And I said, this is what foreign empire produces. This is what interventionism produces. And now watch the reverberation. They're going to be taking away our freedoms in the name of keeping us safe. It's just standard procedure here. They capitalize on the crises, including the crises that their policies produce, to take away our freedom. And man, I got attacked there by people within the libertarian movement. This was a libertarian conference. And the reasoning is that, you see, a lot of libertarians came into the movement from the conservative movement. I mean, it's natural. I mean, we've got Austrian economics, we've got free market economics, Milton Friedman, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, and the whole Austrian paradigm. I mean, this is why I got into it, and how I got into it. I got into this, through the economic aspects of this. And so very few libertarians, there were some of us, we also began looking at the warfare state side of this thing. And from FFS inception, we were talking about this, but people thought it was esoteric, sort of irrelevant, questioning what happened in World War II and Vietnam and Korea and so forth. And then 9/11 comes out, and then all those old conservative feelings within people arose and got the best of them. And they just couldn't understand the libertarian position against empire and foreign interventionism and foreign wars and pro-civil liberties and so forth. And so they reverted back to their old conservative roots of strong central government and strong military defense, and the military is our friend, and it keeps us free and protects our rights, and even though they're like thousands of miles away, and of course taking away our own freedoms here at home with indefinite incarceration, the right to round people up, torture them, including Americans, which is now the system we live under. And ironically, the Republicans are really funny about this issue, because they say, they're always railing against big government this, and big government that, and how we need to downsize government. Well, downsizing government is not what we need in this country. I mean, okay, downsizing the DEA, the DEA agents will continue stealing from people on the highways. They will the cops will still continue harassing blacks in the name of the war on drugs, and they'll expect to be praised and glorified with every kind of drug lord they bust. That it's not a question of downsizing. It's a question that we libertarians ask. What should be the role of government in a free society? And it should not be the role of government to take money from one group of people and give it to another group of people. That's immoral. Charity should be entirely in the voluntary sector. The government shouldn't be having this huge military force, standing army, CIA, NSA. These are totalitarian apparatuses. And they acknowledged that when they first brought these things into existence after World War II, that it was necessary to adopt totalitarianism in order to fight totalitarianism as part of the Cold War against America's World War II close partner and ally, the Soviet communists, which they then turned against after the war was over. Well, no, you don't adopt totalitarianism to fight totalitarianism. You adopt freedom. You adopt your principles of freedom. in order to combat totalitarianism. Because once you become totalitarian, where's the victory in that? And of course, but that's what Republicans say. They favor a strong central government. And that's ironic, because, well, at least for three of the candidates, like Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Rick Perry, they're all Texans. And Texas comes from this heritage of resistance to a strong central government. I mean, we often forget that Texas was a northern province of Mexico. And the reason they declared their independence from Mexico, from the central government, was because Santa Anna had taken over the presidency and was establishing a strong central government, just like the federal government we have today, running things from Mexico City. And the Mexican residents of Texas resented that and said, we're going to declare our independence from this. We don't need your guidance and supervision and control. We don't believe in a strong central government. And yet these three guys, they seem to. Now, Rand Paul's obviously in a different category. He's very strong on civil liberties, and you could tell that in the debate. But then there was that critical moment where Rand's asked, you said that we created ISIS. What do you mean by that? And I thought, okay, here it is. Here's his opportunity, his moment of greatness, like his father. When his father was asked that same question back in that 2008 presidential debate, they said, why they come and attack us? And, the other candidates are given the same Stepford Wives type thing. They hate us for our freedom and values. That's why they attacked on 9/11. Rand Paul took the truthful answer, the libertarian answer. They came over here because we, meaning the government, was over there killing them first. And boy, hell broke loose. They started attacking him viciously. Blame America, hate America, love the terrorists, and all this, And Ron later said, he says, I thought that was the end of my campaign right there. But he stuck by his guns, and that was when his campaign took off. Because people could tell this man is telling the truth about the empire, about the system under which we're living. And that's why they like Donald Trump, because it may not be the right answer. Like Ron Paul was given the right answers. Trump's all over the map. But at least he's speaking what he perceives to be the truth instead of couching it in terms of the Stepford Wives syndrome, where he's supposed to give the right answer. And so Rand had this opportunity to say, yeah, the invasion of Iraq turned the whole country into chaos, into civil war, the same way that the CIA's regime change operation in Guatemala turned that into a 30 years civil war that killed some, I don't know, 1 million people or something. And he didn't say that. He reverted back to the old concept of answering the question that wasn't asked. And he says, oh, well, no, we didn't create ISIS. ISIS created itself. Well, duh, yeah, it creates itself. But it's the circumstances, the chaos that this whole regime change operation brought into existence, that brought into existence ISIS, that motivated these people to do these things because they didn't like a U.S. invasion and regime change operation in their country. So not surprisingly, a lot of the members of ISIS are the people in Saddam Hussein's regime that they ousted. But he didn't say that. And then he answered the question that wasn't asked. He says, I think we should stop arming ISIS allies. It's like, what? Who said anything about that? So, I mean, it just goes to show you that we libertarians are in a whole different ballgame. And so, what's the solution to all this? Well, you're going to see everybody get all hyped up and say, I was doing a presidential campaign and tons of money are going to go into this thing. And, but you see, it's not a question of electing the right person to public office. And this is what we've tried to emphasize for 25 years at FFF. I don't care if you got the greatest libertarian in office as president. It really wouldn't make that much of a difference if the mindset in America is status. Now, obviously, if a libertarian were elected, that would reflect the mindset is going libertarian. Hopeful sign of especially the Ron Paul campaign because of that strong libertarian streak there. Rand is clearly drawing some libertarians, but he clearly, calls himself a conservative. I mean, he is an example of the phenomenon of being a conservative that's importing libertarian ideas into the conservative movement, like on civil liberties. But, even selective interventionism, which Rand stands for, that we need to intervene less overseas, or we have to intervene only when it's in our interest. Well, Mack truck can drive through that exception. I mean, what does that mean in our interest? It's no limitation on government at all. that the real limitation on power is to dismantle the standing army, the CIA, the NSA, the whole warfare state apparatus. Our founding fathers understood this. That was why they stood against empire and standing armies and CIAs and NSAs and, well, the whole welfare state too. And so what we need to do as libertarians is to continue drawing the people that want the free society. Now, for those that want the reform serfdom, great. Okay, that's what you want. That's what you're willing to settle for. Okay, fine. You know, go with your Social Security privatization and your medical IRAs and your selective interventionisms overseas. But don't make any pretensions that this is a free society, because it's not a free society. A free society necessarily turns on, it depends on, it's conditioned on the dismantling of infringements on freedom. So we've got to continue drawing unto us the dismantlers, not the reformers, the dismantlers, those that want to dismantle infringements on freedom, because that's how you achieve the free society. You dismantle it. And that when you reach that critical mass of the dismantlers, of the pro-freedom people, and as compared to the pro-reformers, well, that's what brings the shift. That's what brings a shift to the free society, when you reach that critical mass. And so you see glimpses of this phenomenon in the political process. You see the huge outpouring of support for Ron Paul. I mean, I was shocked when I saw how many people. But also the discontent that's going into the Bernie Sanders campaign on the left. The manifest discontent that's going on with the Trump campaign. This is all a good sign. When people are expressing discontent, it just may be that they don't understand why they're discontented. They're still attached to the whole welfare warfare state. They think it's freedom. They've been inculcated with the notion that this is a free society. They have no idea that there's been two different kind of systems in American history. And it's our job to keep putting out the idea of what a genuinely free society is, because a certain percentage of those people then hear those ideas and say, oh, that's what I am. I'm a dismantler. I'm a libertarian. I'm a pro-freedom person. I'm going to join up with them to achieve the free society and leave the serfdom over here to the Republicans and the Democrats. Anyway, that's the show for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.